about the technicalities of the violations of international law that currently occur on a daily or other, I hate to say it, but it's true, on a minute-to-minute basis in Gaza. There has already been mention made of collective punishment, and if this isn't collective punishment, I don't know what is. The principal element of humanitarian law, which is that part of international law dealing with what is permitted and what is forbidden in combat, is the principle of distinction. The duty to distinguish between military targets and civilian targets, military population and civilian population. That principle is impossible to observe in the kind of massive onslaught on Gaza that is going on now. I have been to Gaza, and it's one thing to read in the New York Times that Gaza is the most densely populated area in the world. And it's another thing to be there and see what densely populated means, and how one house is not on top of another house, and how many people are cramped into their homes in the Jabalia camp. So the failure to distinguish is violated constantly. There is the principle of proportionality, and I adhere to the statement that it is being violated, although some of my friends say don't talk about proportionality because that sounds like you're justifying a symmetry between the Hamas rockets and the Israeli bombs and the Israeli shells. I am not in the least interested in creating an impression of symmetry, but proportionality has to do with what you're allowed to do in response to a military operation on your country by somebody else. Now, what brought about that military operation by Hamas, others have referred to and will refer to. But it simply does not, in legal terms, justify the enormous response that we are seeing. So I think it's important to maintain some kind of very distant relationship for the following simple reason. If you say self-defense, if you say there is no justification at all for self-defense, then it follows that the Hamas rockets can go on. And if the Hamas rockets go on, there will not be an end to the slaughter. This is not a justification, it's not an excuse, it's not an explanation, it is an elementary fact. Because unless the rockets stop, Israel will not stop the kind of attack that you've heard from Chris and that you will hear from others. So here's I do want to look forward a little bit so that this is not an evening simply of lamentation, although lamentation is more than called for. I'm going to say a couple of words about my idea of what the solution to this horrible situation is, which I hope is being negotiated in Egypt. I think there has to be a mutual understanding of absolute end to the violence on both sides. There has to be an absolute commitment by Israel on ending the blockade and allowing humanitarian aid and other goods that make life possible into the territory. And I think there has to be some kind of monitoring of the northern border, which incidentally, according to Jimmy Carter, and also according to the head and the deputy head of the political bureau of Hamas, is likely to be acceptable to Hamas. Also important, it is to note, no, I'm going to skip that because I'm getting a signal, okay? I want to tell you what you can do. You can do a couple of things. You can go to your computer and Google Grassroots International. Grassroots International has been doing wonderful work in Gaza for the last 10 or 15 or 20 years. And they are now calling for emergency donations to supply some small comfort to the terrorized, besieged, and injured people of Gaza. Our lives begin, Martin Luther King said, our lives begin to end when we remain silent about things that matter. These things matter.